It's not a creative itch for me to find the deepest cut and like be the coolest guy because I found the deepest cut. I mean, we do look for new tracks and we do mix new things in, but I love it when I can play "I Want You Back" and a whole room explodes every single time. And I've never played that. You've never heard that piano slide in on a Monday night without hearing half the crowd go, "Oh shit!" Like, and that's what I love about it. I just like to watch people have fun.
Hello, everyone. This is Nashville Demystified, and I'm your host, Alex Steed. Nashville Demystified is a show in which I get to know this city better by talking with the folks who live, work, agitate, and make art here. This show is made possible by Knack Factory, a video and content production house with offices here in the city. It is distributed by We Own This Town, a collection of podcasts made by Nashvillians. All the shows are great. Go and listen to them right now. There are music shows, there are interview shows, there are topical shows. There are primers on things you don't know much about but would like to know more. Go listen. It's all very good. Today, I'm just going to cut right to it. I talk with Jacob Jones, who is a realtor. He's also a communication strategist and a musician. And he is the DJ, or one of the DJs, behind Motown Monday. Motown Monday is a dance night at the 5 spot, which takes place on Monday nights, obviously. It's garnered literally international acclaim for just being a really fucking fun night. It's been going on for 11 years. And we talk about that. We talk about what that means, how it came about, why it's significant, and what it's led to for Jacob to throw a party that is maybe even more well-known than he is. I actually make an exception for my no more straight white guy rule on this show, which I implemented subconsciously, and it's not hard and fast. Maybe there'll be others who are appealing enough, but anytime a PR person gets in touch with me and they're like, "We want to talk with you about putting this person on their show," I let them know that there's a pretty unofficial no more straight white guys rule. But Jacob is intriguing to me for a number of different reasons. We'll talk about that here. He's actually the reason that I ended up in Nashville in a way, or one of the reasons. And it's a roundabout way. Last year, I was trying to figure out where in the United States I was hoping to land upon leaving Maine. I drove around the country literally a couple times to figure out where was interesting to me. And my friend Bernadette, who lives in Maine, but has a substantial connection to Nashville, reached out to connect me to Jacob. And through a strange series of circumstances, I did not end up meeting with Jacob. I met with somebody else, with his business partner, or excuse me, one of the people that he works with. And just, through a comedy of errors, I fell in love with Nashville. I'll tell that bigger story at another time, but I decided that this was the place for me, and I eventually met Jacob, who was the person I was supposed to meet originally, who ended up catalyzing this whole funny trip that resulted in me getting here and then starting this podcast. And he actually produces a podcast for the company he works for, or for one of the companies he works for, Stoked. And that's been an inspiration and an influence for this podcast. Just seeing Jacob make that show made me want to make this show, or made me understand how to make a show, I should say. I talked with Jacob about a whole lot of things about how Motown Monday became Motown Monday. It wasn't originally called that, it turns out, and that was fascinating to find. And we talk about what he's learned along the way. We also talk about something he mentioned so casually once in passing a few months ago, that when he was a teenager, he was present at a school shooting. And it's, that's not funny, and I don't mean to make light, but it's just this thing. It's like, to know Jacob is to know he's the sort of person who would just very casually, in telling another story, mention without any fanfare that he was at a school that was shot up, and we talk about that and what that means, and we talk about that in the context of this present ongoing moment in the United States. And we talk about how it shifted his perspective. We're both people who have interesting proximity to mortality for a handful of different reasons, and we discuss that here. But first, it feels a little tacky to say this right after having talked about Jacob having been involved or, present at a school shooting. He wasn't involved. He was there when it happened in a scary way. But again, this feels tacky. However, we need you to follow us on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter, and Facebook, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you can. Rate, all of that kind of engagement helps in some weird way. It convinces people that we're real, and it convinces other people to give us money to do this thing. And when I say us, I mean me, because I'm not the person. It really does help. It really does help, and it helps us keep this thing interesting. All right. That's enough about me. On to Jacob. Do you think what you did 11 years ago would be possible in Nashville today?
No.
Yeah, why not?
And not because of me or Reno or our, or anything like that.
Because of you.
It's not because of our, unique canny promotional skills or anything like that. No, 2008 East Nashville was just a different place.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just starting, it already done a lot. I moved here in 2007, so anyone who's been here the whole time could probably point out that I'm wrong about it just starting to boom. But there was a sense of like people moving there. Rent was still cheap. There were only like 3 bars, 1 coffee shop. It was a very vibey, cool neighborhood to be in, but there wasn't a ton going on. In fact, the 5 Spot asked us to do Monday nights because bands couldn't draw a crowd on Monday nights. So that was where it came from. Was, hey, we're going to stop having bands and we're just going to do a 2-for-1 night and ask the neighborhood people to come in and hang out. And it was on the first 2-for-1 night that I started screwing around with an iPod and playing songs. And then I was like, let me come back next week and bring my turntables. That's kind of how it happened. So. I don't know. I don't think so, because it was a void. Like all the service industry folks, which was kind of the crew I ran with, they don't have anything to do on Monday, which is their Saturday. Right. It's the night they go out. So that it was the only thing happening. And now Nashville's got so much going on, and there's so many. I'm in dad life, so I'm way removed. I'm an old man, but even what I know about, there's a lot going on. So I'm sure if you're like in the scene and you're in your mid-20s, like I was then. There's just a lot more options, a lot more to compete with, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
So using advanced math, I'm assuming you were doing this at 24. Ish? 25.
25. Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah.
Because 25 is like a good age. 25 is a good age to be doing something and getting noticed for it.
You're right. 25 is when I really grew up, I think. 20, I kind of started taking myself seriously. I grew up in Atlanta and I played music, but I'd also done drugs and drank a lot and just had fun, which I think is totally fine at 8, 19, 20, 21, whatever. And then I moved to New York for 3 years, basically did the same thing. Had a blast, had an amazing experience, certainly added to my life, but I didn't do anything I didn't live in New York because I was pursuing acting or anything that you needed to be in New York for. I was just in New York having fun. So when I moved here, I really wanted to kind of grow up a little bit. And so I started a band, and we only lasted a year because we were kind of a party band, and I was like this buzzkill guy. I wanted to get better and not just drink.
Oh yeah.
So
I was always envious of that.
And so we didn't last long, and then I started doing my own music, I think, because I could control it, and I was practicing a lot, and it was all around 25 years old. Yeah, I moved here when I was 24. Yeah, moved here when I was 24. And yeah, so started Motown Monday when I was 25. Met Molly, my wife, right after I turned 25. It's funny you asked that way. I never really thought about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a. Yeah, I feel like it's the time. You know how there's the time when there's several times in your life. There's when you're maybe 7 or 8, where you sort of like come online in a way, you know,
Yeah.
and then like maybe in your mid-teens you do it again, and maybe it's in the mids of the decades, I don't know.
Maybe.
But then there's a time when there's sort of some like a different self-actualization where you see like where you're going a little bit more.
Yeah.
And 25 would be, I feel like, a good time to start doing something that people are paying some special attention to.
Come online. That's a great way to put it. It's funny. Yeah, I'm watching my 3-year-old do this. Like I mean, literally in the last week.
Yeah.
So, you know, I have 2 sons, and one of them's 3, and he's been kind of like a little bit of a late bloomer in his like communication and everything. And in the last week, it's like he just all of a sudden stopped making cat noises at me and started speaking in like fluent paragraphs.
Right.
It's like, whoa, whoa.
He's like, I've been in this
it's been
machine
sitting in there,
and now I'm here.
Yeah. My actually, it's last night. My wife turned to him and was like, Sam, it's been really great getting to know you this week, because like he's finally, you know. Yeah. So yeah, maybe there are points in life, and 25 was definitely one for me. You know, it was like cool to be in East Nashville then, because for me it was a new place. Mm-hmm. So not only were all these things happening here, and you could kind of feel the energy, but it was new to me, and so Tennessee was new. It all felt kind of new. I didn't know a ton of people. You know, everything was a nice, clean break from my old life.
Yeah.
You know, I worked in the service industry, so I bartended at Three Crow, and I was in bands, so like I was always out at night, and I built my kind of, you know, relationships and friendships that way. And then having the party though it was great to build something kind of accidentally at first, and then noticed the accident, like, oh man, people really like this, and then feed it and grow it and promote it and make it better and work with collaborate with one of my best friends on it, and then still to be doing that.
Yeah.
11 years later. I mean, this Monday we're bringing on a sponsor, which is actually special because it's a friend of mine who started a company called Nelson's Greenbrier. They make Belgian bourbon. Mm. But his family used to make whiskey here 100 years ago, and after the Depression stopped, and now he's been working for like 10 years to get his great-great-great-great-great-grandfather's recipe back on the market, and it just hit the market yesterday.
Right on.
And I bring it up because we're doing like a 6-month thing with them at the party, and it's so we're like reinvigorated and doing all this promotions and trying to come up with cool ideas, and like so here we are 11 years later, we're still trying to do something a little different.
Yeah. And so Motown Monday. Okay, you told the story a bit before. Again, I'll stop referring to audio that doesn't exist. But I can't help but notice you're a white dude.
Oh yeah, well, it's obvious. Yeah.
You're a handsome white guy. How did your interest and sort of expertise and focus in Motown become so honed that you found yourself running a night?
It's a very valid question. Okay, I think there's a few answers. So one is coming up in Atlanta, there was a club called MJQ. And it was kind of like the club for people who don't go to clubs. It's like you go there and drink PBR and like stay up till 4 a.m, and they had a Britpop night. And I used to go every Wednesday when I was 18, 19, 20, 21, and like to, you know, hang out, meet girls, whatever. It was like the night you went out, you know, and it was all themed around this thing. And so that was my first exposure to like, oh, this just all this one genre, and everyone loves the DJ, and they're like all having an amazing time, and they're all meeting people, and it was like the center of a community. Like everyone went to this night. It probably still goes on. And while I was in New York, I remember this so vividly. I was at some bar on the Lower East Side, and this guy I kind of knew through the bar I worked in was DJing, and he was doing kind of a theme night, but it was like real sock hoppy. Like he had on a leather jacket and like his hair greased back, and
this was in New York.
This was in New York, yeah. And he was playing a Gene Vincent song, the song Bebop Alula, and I remember going over and being like, "What is this?" It's like, you know, this like 50s, you know, rockabilly crooner sound. I never heard it. And I kind of went home, and like I already like had a general knowledge of that kind of music, but that night kind of set me off and like digging into it a little more. And so when I used to DJ in New York, just every once in a while, different places, and so I would start playing that music, mixed in with, you know, whatever else, with like the New York Dolls and Nick Cave and whatever I felt like. I never did like a really concentrated thing. I just was all over the place. And so when the 5 spot asked. So we had our first Monday at the Five Spot, which was not a Motown Monday. It was just a bunch of neighborhood people hanging out. And did I tell you the Huey Lewis in the news story?
Yeah, please tell me.
Yeah, I'll tell
me,
again.
yeah.
So basically, we're all sitting at the bar. It's like 1 a.m, and there's a computer at the bar playing music off iTunes, I assume. This was like 2008. So I Want a New Drug comes on, and we're all like just lit enough. We're like, yes! Like we're all like, dancing around. And so someone was like, let's hear the whole record. Like someone play sports. And sports wasn't on the computer, so I was like, hold on. And I went out to my car and grabbed my brick iPod, because phones did not do this at the time. And in a very like small twist of fate, Todd, the owner, instead of taking my iPod and playing sports, just handed me the auxiliary cable while I was sitting at the bar and was like, hey, man, do whatever. So I played sports, and then I started just playing all sorts of stuff. And we just sat there. And I'm sitting at the bar with my iPod in my hand, drinking, having fun. And so at the end of the night, I was like, let me come back next week, and I'm going to bring some like proper turntables, and you throw me some beers or something. And he's like, yeah, totally. So in between that 7 days, I was just like, I'm going to dig deeper into this 50s, 60s stuff. And Reno, who does it with me, he actually did not live here yet, but he was coming a month later.
Right.
And so I did a few Mondays with some other guys. And then when Reno showed up, he lived at my house for 4 months while he lived in my living room while he was getting his act together here. And he showed up with like a rental minivan and all his possessions in the back and lived in my living room. And in that, so that was a really great collaborative time for us. So I told him like, hey, I started this thing, and people actually dance at it. Like, you know, there were only like 30 people there maybe, but they were dancing. And it's like I'm playing all this Chuck Berry and Little Richard, and I knew that he liked that stuff, so we had it in common. So the long-winded answer is I had like a general like interest in early rock and roll, but I didn't know a ton about Motown, and I didn't know a ton about I never dug deep into the crates of Motown or Tamla or Chess or Stax. I just knew the hits, but DJing that stuff made me find out. So I kind of immersed myself in that world as a result of hosting the party. Right on. And so it happened. So yeah, I mean, and now, I mean, we've been doing a radio show for years, and like, I've had to like do research, and it's been that's one of the best parts about it.
Right, you've become a doctor.
Yeah, I'm working on. I don't know about that. I'm working on my. I'm a student teacher.
You really should. You should like check to see if a university will back your 11 years of experience in this. And that maybe you could just write a dissertation or something. Become a PhD.
It's funny is because I growing up, I grew up in the Midwest, and like my dad. You remember Columbia House?
Yeah.
My dad was a member
of
course, right? Columbia House, for those who don't know, was a subscription service where you would fill out what CDs you wanted every month, and they would send them to you. So my dad had that, and we used to have like stacks of CDs, towers in the house, and he had tapes. He didn't have a ton of LPs, but he had tons of CDs. And so growing up, my dad was super. My parents and their friends were super into like the Stones, Bruce Springsteen, Tom Petty, John Mellencamp, because I'm from Indiana. Yeah. Like very Midwest Southern rock, or not Southern, like classic Midwest rock. And like the Cars, and anyway, so I had a huge foundation in that. And so when I got into punk in high school, punk and hardcore music, none of my friends had that. Like I had friends who just never listened to Tom Petty. I was like, right. What's wrong with you? Like you don't know, you never listened to like Tattoo You, the Rolling Stones. It was like I was played at my house every Friday night. Yeah. But but what I didn't get was any of the stuff that I do at the party. Like I didn't hear any of that stuff growing up. Like maybe like Elvis every once in a while, or I don't think any of it. And so it led to having that like background in some classic rock that a lot of my friends didn't have. I think planted a seed in me to like want to really dig, like follow musical history backwards. Right. So when I moved here, I was doing that for my own, not before this party had nothing to do with it, for my own like musical understanding, because I play music that's centered in the blues. So you start following that stuff back through, you're in Muddy Waters, and then you're Robert Johnson, and then you're learning about everything from the 30s and 40s. And so I just have a tendency to do that. So when I started DJing Monday nights, I mean, we started with a lot more rockabilly and garage rock and the Stax soul. A lot of it wasn't nearly as Motown-y. As a matter of fact, it wasn't called Motown Monday for years.
What was it called?
It was called Keep On Moving.
Oh, cool.
And that's the name of the party was Keep On Moving. And that's like, that's what it was for 4 or 5 years. I mean, that's what it was branded. That's what all the graphics are. That's what everyone. The problem was everyone started calling it Motown Monday.
Oh, cool.
And I didn't, yeah. And I didn't, because of the alliteration, it's so easy, right?
Those
And
fuckers, man.
Yeah. And there are other Motown Mondays in other cities, and I was like, I don't want to do that. And then, because then people think like you're just playing Motown music. But man, it got so overwhelming that I remember I was speaking at, I think it was Vanderbilt. It was like an entrepreneur class.
Yeah.
I was with my buddy Marcus Whitney. And he was speaking actually, and I was filming him. And so at some point, there's like 150 people in this room, kids. And at some point, he's trying to introduce me. And he's like, oh, this is my man, Jacob over here. Y'all all know him from Keep On Moving. Mm-hmm. Silence. And he's like, yeah, you know, like the 5 spot. Silence. Motown Mondays. Oh, the whole room erupts. As soon as that was over, I called Reno. I was like, we got to change the name.
Yeah.
And we did.
Right on. Yeah, so you got to listen, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and then now, of course, I do get the thing where people come up, they're like, where's the this isn't Motown. I'm like, yeah, we do a lot more than that, but it's just centered around that.
Yeah.
You know,
you should get a sign made that is like an FAQ that shuts people down from the get-go. Because I can imagine if you're running a thing that is called for whatever reason.
Right, it puts it in a box.
You're dealing with some people
sometimes
who want to let you know that they know more than you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Or like, you know, there's the, you know, yes, this is called Motown Mondays, and this is not Motown you're playing. I get that. Or, you know, or I'll play a newer track that sounds old, like, you know, like J.D. McPherson or something, and people will be like, this isn't from the 60s. I'm like, it's not the...
Yeah, exactly.
It's not the point.
This isn't like a chant that's going to like bring back something from the dead if we do it wrong. Like,
it's funny. It's like I've had the same yeah, exactly. I've had the same like disarming approach. I think to that for years is if someone wants to come up and like music school me, or the opposite. Someone wants to come up and like, will you please play Beyonce or something? I'm like, well, same thing. I always just say like, why don't you just like relax, have fun? I promise, like, you're gonna have a good time. Just let it happen.
That's great.
And then most people are cool with that, and they just like, people have this weird impulse to be the you know, they to interject themselves in the like. And I get it. I do too. I'm a DJ. Yeah. But usually I just like, hey, just cool. It'll be fine. You can hear Beyonce in your car on the way home. Like
that's extraordinary. That's an approach I want to use more in my life, and I don't know how telling it is about you that you use it, or how telling it is about me, but that never dawned on me that would be an approach that you could use. But that's fantastic. I'm sure it's very useful.
Yeah, or someone will come up and be like, "Oh man, will you play, you know, some '80s jam or something?" And I'll be like, "Oh, I love that track. Yeah, have you heard the other track on that record?" Like, yeah. And I'm like, "Yeah, but I can't play it because it's just, you know, it's not really the thing tonight. But it's a great song." Right. And then that always is like, "Oh, okay." Right. And like.
Yeah, because if you're saying no in a way, you're telling them that they're terrible in the Brit.
Right. So if you were just a dick about it all the time, then maybe it would, you know, yeah. I mean, our job on that night is to have, you know, to exude an energy of like fun and like escape.
Right.
And so I don't really want to have a bad time. I want to keep it on the rails of what the party is supposed to be, and so that there's some consistency, because there's a lot of people who. Man, we have regulars, but we get people every week who've never been there. And I mean people, I mean like probably 50 to 100 people in that room have never been there.
Right.
And they want to hear shout.
Is your opportunity.
And they want to hear Ain't Too Proud to Beg. And they want to, and so like I've had other musician and DJ friends be like, how do you do that every week? You know, it's kind of like Groundhog Day. I'm like, yeah, it kind of is. But it doesn't, it's not a creative itch for me to find the deepest cut and like be the coolest guy because I found the deepest cut. I mean, we do look for new tracks, and we do mix new things in, but I love it when I can play I Want You Back and the whole room explodes every single time. Seriously. And I've never played that. You've never heard that piano slide in on a Monday night without hearing half the crowd go, "Oh shit!" And that's what I love about it. I just like to watch people have fun.
It's a holy song.
Yeah,
it's a secular holy song.
It's the moment of like full let loose,
totally.
Like, and everyone knows it. It's a cue.
Oh my god, that's so good. Do you think about like is this a thing that you want to like keep doing, or is there a reason why you're compelled to keep returning to it?
Man, I mean, I don't know when we'll stop. I don't want to stop. I mean, there are so many Monday nights where I'm tired, or I have to get up early on Tuesday, or, you know, and now I'm in a point in my life where I have 2 little kids. I have 3 different jobs. So there's lots of like, but then when I get there, there's a few things that keep me really engaged with it. Mostly it's the crowd and the fact that it's always fun. There's always energy to feed off of. It's always different for me every Monday night. And I get to hang out with my buddy, which I don't see we don't really like kick it otherwise because we see each other once a week.
Right.
And so I don't know when we'll stop. I would have never ever guessed I'd have thrown a party for 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have never ever guessed I'd thrown a party for 2 years. Parties just don't last that long.
Right.
So now that it's been 11 years, could it be 20? Do I want?
Yeah.
I have no clue. I mean, I think part of the impetus behind us starting our own radio show 2.5 years ago was to like, okay, like maybe we'll stop DJing eventually, and we'll put that energy into digging through on this radio show, which is more about history and finding some rare tracks.
It's a great show, man.
Thanks.
It's a very it's a good show because you're entertaining too.
It's a totally different vibe where we're like, we want you to listen, like cook in your kitchen to this show.
Right.
We want you to like vibe out at your house with some cocktails and your friends with this. Whereas Monday night, it's like everything needs to be a banger.
Right.
I need you to dance. Right. And so the show is a whole different thing to do. So that was kind of like maybe it'll evolve into that, and I have no idea. We're still doing that show. We're actually in the middle of like searching for what we're going to do with it. I mean, it's fine right now, but we're trying to grow it. Mm-hmm. So I have no idea. I have no idea how long we'll do it.
Yeah.
I really dig it. I mean, I'm not. I always say like I'm not really a DJ. Like
right.
we're not beat matching. Like I have friends who are DJs. You know, my buddy Nick who does boom bap, my buddy Coach. Jeremy Todd, like those dudes are like, you know, they're proper musicians when it comes to DJing. Like they're pulling up different instrumental tracks and mixing them together live. We don't do any of that. Well, one, this music doesn't really lend itself easily to that, for me at least. And two, we're just more like hosts. Like I'm a song picker. I'm not the way I transition the songs is super simple. It's like there are some fancy ways to do it, but mostly it's just keep you dancing, keep the vibe good, be good hosts, make sure it feels good in there. We're worried about the lights, the volume level, like the orchestration of the furniture. Like that's more of our forte.
Yeah.
Than actually DJing. So
but that's so important. It's like going to a restaurant where people are like, we're more focused on the atmosphere, this and all that stuff makes the food taste good.
That's right. The story makes everything taste different. Right.
Good food in a cold, weird environment isn't great.
And then like so when I can't remember if I told you the story, but when I grew up. I had a ranch in a house, brick ranch in a neighborhood, and at the end of the house was a bonus room, and in the room was like one of those giant L couches, you know, mm-hmm. and a pool table, and the computer for the house, like the desktop everyone used. This is before
that's the
laptops.
room I grew up in.
Yeah, so you know the room, right? And there was a deck off that room. So there were a couple key things. Is I had that room and the door locked on that room. Yeah. So I always hosted everyone. Mm-hmm. I wanted to, ever since like middle school. I was like, come over to my house, and my friends would all tell you, like they all know this. So, like they would in middle school and high school they would come over, and like my dad had the 5-disc changer in there, and I would pick the 5 discs. I would shuffle them. I would like mess with the lights or whatever. I was the one hosting. I loved it. And as we got older, people would come over and I would be making people cocktails and drinks. And like, every time we met for Christmas back in Georgia where I'm from, like we'd all go to my house one night. Right. And I think that like just seeped into me and like that hospitality thing.
Yeah.
And then of course I worked for years in like the bar and restaurant business and learned more about that. But like, I think somewhere that like hosting friends, providing the, just the vibe for the night is something I really enjoy and I'm really inclined to. So I try to apply that to everything. So I mean, in an odd way, that actually works really well for the dance party, obviously, but even for like all of the marketing and like brand strategy stuff I've done during my daytime hours and even real estate. Like it's all the same skill set.
Yeah, definitely. So it's hosting, making people feel good.
It's easy. Have fun, right. Do your job well, and make sure people are having a good time, and that music's not too loud, not too low, lights not too bright, not too dim. That's it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Who do you remember who the DJ was that you saw in New York that changed your perspective?
No, I don't remember his name. He was a friend of a friend, but I just remember like I just had never heard that music before. Right. I didn't, and so I went and looked up Gene Vincent, and then that led me to like I didn't know any of that 50. I knew Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis and those kind of like obvious ones, but I didn't know any of the other stuff.
a blue jean, baby, when I bop with you. Well, hell, my heart starts a hopping like a kangaroo. My feet do things I never done before. Well, a blue jean, baby, give me more, more, more. Well, a blue jean bop, baby.
And so, I was like, oh. And I just thought it was cool that you could go into this basement where he was DJing, and it was like, it felt like a 50s sock hop. Like people were dressed up. Yeah. So when that definitely seeped into my consciousness, and then when we started Motown Monday, it was like definitely an amalgamation of like the MJQ Britpop thing every week, and just being like, oh, we can create a destination of like inside these walls for these 4 hours won't feel like anywhere else.
Right.
And if it's like Dirty Dancing or something. Like we want it to be like it's sweaty. I mean, the Five Spot, you used to be able to smoke in there until 2011 or something, which was awful.
Yeah.
But the thing it did do was like you'd roll in there on a summer night and it'd be like 95 degrees in the bar. Right. They had also had a bad AC system and it'd be smoky, and everyone's sweating, and people were like, it was just like where am I?
Right.
And so I think that was a special part about it.
I asked about the DJ thing because I remember. I mean, I think for people of a particular age, and you and I are of a very similar particular age, like the internet in the last 10 years has made genrelessness or like living outside of the confines of a genre much more of a real and possible thing, right? But I think like in the 2000s in particular, like it took getting out of your box a little bit in order to like know that there were other things available. And for me, living in New York was that big thing. Yeah. Like I remember I worked at a cafe, and this guy who lived upstairs at the cafe, he was a DJ, and he played largely electronic music, but he also played throwback stuff. And his name was Jim Thompson, who was Hans Orphis, who was the original drummer of Gwar, right? And
okay.
but Jim like presented almost like, and not in a nostalgic way. This is just like who he was. Like he presented like Fonzie. Like he would like walk into a place just full denim, like slick back hair or whatever, and he was warm, and you were just like stoked that Jim was there. You were like so happy or whatever. And I remember it being like pretty, because I was in my early 20s, and it was like living in Maine, or living in a somewhat remote place from what is big in the rest of the country. I always felt like you had to sort of adhere to genre loyalty in a really big way. And then meeting a guy who was in Gwar,
but looked like a greaser,
who was like playing throwback tunes, who was like playing electronic. I was like, oh, like this adherence is just shackles.
Yeah.
Like this is fucking me.
Yeah, yeah.
Like what?
Isn't it weird how New York's a great place to learn that or unlearn that. Because I remember I used to work at 4th and B in the Lower East Side, and it was all glass windows on the corner, and I'd be working a day shift, and you'd see some dude walk by in like a giraffe suit and be like, yeah, that makes sense. I remember that, like that's an actual thing. I mean, like you would just nothing would like you're in New York. Like what? Who knows what that dude's doing? I don't know. Like someone would walk by in assless chaps. Like I don't like you learn to like not. That's par for the course there. So I think you can kind of I don't know about genrelessness, but you can learn that like you can kind of express yourself however you want, and people will just kind of deal with it.
Totally. Like that you can be appealing, you can be a kid, or formerly a kid, who is in punk bands, and then go and run a night that is assigned by others to be Motown Monday. Yeah. Can I ask you, the last time we talked, you mentioned this so casually in conversation because we were talking about another thing, and this wasn't this interview, this was we met in between. And you mentioned in passing, and I've since looked it up, but you mentioned in passing that you were not involved in, but you were in a school that had a shooting.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess I didn't know that because you probably don't walk around and talk about that every day. Okay, by the way. But I imagine, can you just say like what that scene was? And the only reason I want to ask you questions about that is because we now are in a time where that feels like such a part of our social fabric, but I imagine that when it happened, it was not.
It wasn't, no. Yeah, I don't mind talking about that at all. If you want to go there. So I went to high school in Conyers, Georgia. I went to a high school called Heritage High School, and a month to the day after Columbine, there was a shooting there. So I was a junior, I think, and it was the end of the school year. So it was May 20th, 1999. Yeah, because Columbine was April 20th, right? So anyway, if you remember, their school shootings and public shootings were not a thing, except that year there were like 6.
Right.
It was like a weird rash of like, what's going on? It was a very kind of a small version of what we've just been dealing with now as norm. And Columbine was part of that. There were some other smaller ones. And it was a Friday. I was in the school earlier than I normally would have been. Actually, it's weird because like so my circle of friends, most of them weren't there because on Fridays we would go to Chick-fil-A in the morning. We had just gotten our cars, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we would drive to Chick-fil-A and like have breakfast and like screw around and then get to class right at the bell.
I remember that seems so exciting when you have a car.
When you have your own
go
car
off school.
Fuck yeah! I could drive to the fast food place and hang out with your friends at 7:30 in the morning.
Took me, like, totally unrelated to the story. Just took me back to that lovely time in high school.
Yeah, freedom, baby. But I couldn't that Friday because I had to turn in a photography assignment, and so I had to get it in for whatever reason before the bell. And so I got to school early and turned it in, and then I'm sitting in like the big old commons area in the middle of the school, big giant room. I'm just sitting on a bench, and I hear like 2 firecrackers, like pop, pop. It's like, oh, and it's worth noting, like this was the last day for seniors when there were usually pranks. Like so I got up, I turned around, I didn't see anything. It sounded like a firecracker. It didn't sound like a gun. And I thought it was probably like seniors messing around because it was the last day. So I just stepped back down with my back to the noise. So then I heard it again, like 2 more pop-pops. And so then I stood up and I turned around and I look across the commons area and there's this kid who I knew because he was in my first period Spanish class. His name was TJ. And he's got a rifle at his hip and he's shooting across the room into like where people were having breakfast. And he's crying. He's like pacing and crying. It was so weird. And it was like one of those like very like cock action guns that's like very BB gun looking, and it wasn't really loud, and so he's firing. I'll never forget this. I was like, what's going on? I thought he was like firing at someone like in a fight, and then man, he lowered that thing and cocked it and just turned 90 degrees right at me and fired. And that was like the Columbine had just happened, so that was like he's shooting everyone, not just and then just like every like pandemonium. I remember I was sitting with 2 of my friends, Gina Corey and Jackie Ashford, and I grabbed both their arms. I think it was Jackie who like straight up froze, like you'd see in a movie, like froze, could not move, and I like had to basically push her with my body. And we start running towards the double. There's like those banks of doors that lead out into the bus lanes in high schools. So we're all running, groups of people running. You're still hearing shots, and we get out. This guy I knew was shot in the leg right next to me. He fell. Like I watched him fall. Yeah. It was a school shooting that fortunately no one died in. He shot 6 people, and he shot a freshman girl who had really serious injuries and had to be life flighted. But because he was shooting from his hip, and because I don't think he was aiming and he was crying, he shot a lot of people in the leg. Fortunately, but anyway, it was insane, man. I mean, ran across the street into this neighborhood. Everyone's going up to random houses, banging on doors, trying to get adults out. I realized my girlfriend at the time was in the bathroom, and the gunshots weren't really loud. So of course I'm like, oh, she's gonna come out and like not know what's going on, and like a dumbass, I just run back into the school. Yeah. So now I'm running back into the high school, and it's only been, I don't know, a minute or 2, but now I run in and there's kids laid out front. That it's a whole scene. Kids that have been wounded, and then but there's no sense of adults controlling anything. Like I was able to run right back in the school and no one stopped me. Yeah. And run in the school, and this time the school is completely empty. You can't see anything. But he had a .357 Magnum in his pants. So he's now got that, but I can't see him, but I can hear it. It sounds like a cannon down the hall. And I turn down this hallway, and this door opens, and this kid, I think his name was Drew Morris, clotheslined me. Just like saw me get in the hall, opened the door, straight clotheslined me into the classroom. And I remember I was shaking so bad that he laid me on the ground, and I had a watch on, and the watch was just like banging the tile floor repeatedly. And we were all in those rooms for, I don't know, 15 minutes or something, and then they came over the intercom and told us all to go to the football field. That kid did not die. He was disarmed by the vice principal, and then stood trial as an adult, and was sentenced to like 40 something years in prison.
Wow.
And just got out like a little
Really?
2 years ago. Yeah.
I didn't really. That's an interesting fact to think that like anyone in this sort of like long list of school shooters, because they usually associate,
Yes.
they usually die, or take their own lives, and I hadn't thought that any of these people were out.
It's such a bizarre feeling because, I mean, honestly, it's not something I think about a lot, but now I'm thinking about it because you brought it up. Like he was 17. I don't know I didn't know him well enough to know what his deal was. I know that he had a very serious high school romance that had fallen apart, and like he was just kind of a strange, quiet kid. I know that his dad had a whole bunch of guns, like so many that TJ was able to sell some to some friends without his dad knowing. Yeah. Because he sold one to a friend of mine like a year before that for some. It's a whole other dumb story. Yeah. But anyway, he got like the book thrown at him because he's kind of. I mean, so again, lucky no one was killed, but he did hurt a lot of people, and so he spent. I guess if he just got out, we're the same age, so he spent 20 years in jail.
Right. The thing that you said that was so interesting to me that I remember. So I remember when Columbine happened, I taped with a VHS. I taped the whole day of CNN.
Oh, really?
Because I was like, oh, things are different. Like I knew immediately. I mean, that was, and I was like, because I'd known, there was like the Paducah one, there was like a handful of ones that happened on the lead up. And I think there might have been one or two smaller ones earlier that year. There was the big one. And the thing you just said that resonated with me, and I think undid my entire ideology, approach to life, etc. Was you said it struck you when you went back into the school or whatever that like no adults were in charge.
No,
and that's what struck me with Columbine. I was like, oh, no one's in charge. Yeah. Like if someone decides to disrupt, there's nothing.
They took over an entire school, 2 people.
Totally.
And
totally.
I mean, yeah, I'm not downplaying my experience. It wasn't great, but I was fortunate that like it wasn't that. It wasn't a massacre.
Right.
But it was. Here's what it did do to me, that I think has been a positive thing, and is you walk into a school one morning where you're supposed to be, and someone shoots at you. Right. And I mean, I definitely have the feeling of like running towards doors while someone is shooting at me, not knowing if I'm about to get hit. And so like after that, it's just kind of like all bets are off. Like, I mean, of course you like I don't wake up every day with this like renewed sense of you only get to live once kind of thing because of that. But it definitely like played into like, well, what you got to live your life. Like someone could walk into your school and just kill you, or your workplace, or whatever. You could be at the fucking mall. I don't know, but like that definitely. Underscored. It was a little bit of like a cauterizing kind of adult graduation. Like, hey, like nothing is really that stable. Yeah,
I within a year I was in some situation and these guys who I at this point believed were pretending to be undercover cops pulled a gun on me, and it was scary, right? And then I hadn't processed it or anything. And then the next year I took care of my father while he was dying for a year. And I think that those as like bookend experiences, I love those. I don't wish them upon people, right? But I love those experiences because I know so many people who know in theory that it could end at any time, and they try to conduct their life like that, but they haven't done the work yet. Right. And you can't do the work unless it's either hoisted upon you, or you decide to put everything aside and engage in a real life.
I mean, that's a really good way to put it. You can't do the work unless you go through something. I mean, yeah, classic story, right? Someone gets cancer, beats cancer. After cancer is like, I'm going to live my life the way I always wanted to. Right. And so the moral is live your life the way you always want to without cancer. Right. It's easier said than done.
Oh God, yeah, totally.
And so
totally.
So I have a bit of that. It's more like a seasoning on my life. I mean, I can't just wake up every day and be like, today's the last day, maybe. So I'm gonna, I mean, I plan for
you had to take that realtor's license test.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, closing a house takes 30 days. So, I mean, I have a family and I have like goals and I think about the future and I plan and I have retirement accounts and but I do think about it. I don't think about the shooting a lot, but just like my outlook on life. Like I do think like if not today could be the last day, like I'm only going to be older tomorrow.
Right.
You know, like it only is going to be harder later. I might as well enjoy. There's a mixture and a balance to everything for me. And there's a balance of living in the moment, enjoying everything, taking it all in, and also thinking about what those moments might be like in 5 years and helping plan for those.
Right. Well, and part of it is like, I think a lot of times people get confused and they think that it means that it's like pandemonium and anarchy in your life all the time. And sometimes it just means like, just enjoy being in traffic. Like just don't take it personally, you know, like do something with that time.
It's something that I am, I work at all the time, but if you can just be present, even when you don't want to be, traffic's a great example. You can kind of enjoy your life as it moves by you. That's one thing that kids have done for me too. Is like that's very stereotypical. Is time starts moving real fast.
Yeah.
Just because you're busy and you're watching them, there's something about it. I don't know. Something about the biology of it is, man, it starts moving really fast. Like all of a sudden, you're just like, whoa, my kid's gonna be 6 years old. What? I remember I brought him home from the hospital yesterday. And so then there's a and also having another generation below you, there's some kind of like mortality check on it. It's like, oh, I'm going to be dead soon.
Right.
Like,
well, because their growth looks like faster growth, right? Because
totally.
Because
and you're watching
so much happens.
Yeah, I think it's that. And I can remember being 5.
Yeah.
That's where my memories kind of start.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at my oldest son, Henry, and I'm like, I remember what you're experiencing right now. You're in kindergarten. I remember that. So I'm like, there's some kind of relationship with it where at least for me, where I've been like, oh, I remember when my dad turned 40, I thought he was so old because I was, 10 or something. And I'm like, I'm just a couple years from that. And that's not old. And now I don't even think like 70 is old. Like because I'm getting, you know what I mean? It's like it's accelerating faster and faster. And then there's so much that I'm enjoying and grateful for and all those things. But it's like, there's a bit of like a, don't blink.
Right. Well, I'm constantly doing the math that I think starts to happen around 30. I could be wrong, but I'm constantly like, and I can pull it out of, I can see the pattern in every sort of like pop culture relation to time, right? So it's like so for example, like this is the one that comes into my head. The distance between now and Weezer's Blue Album is the distance between Weezer's Blue Album and Woodstock.
Oh my God. Holy shit.
And I do that. I don't know what is wrong with my brain, but I see that all the time, and it's very helpful in making me realize how quickly time is going.
Yeah, no, I do that a little bit. Like that's a good one. I mean, I'll think about like the Beatles were a band for 3 less years than I've been running this party. Yeah.
And what did they do, really?
Right, what did they do? I mean, you could think of, like, I do think about that really in terms of that party all the time. I'll be like, okay, especially when we cross 10 years, I'm like, think about what happened between 1965 and 1975, like culturally.
Yeah, sure.
Like all of that, everything there. That's how long you've been standing up here with these computers.
Absolutely.
And these people, like, it's yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's funny. I do that as well.
Oh, man. All right, man. I think that was a better conversation than the first conversation.
Good. I will just screw that first conversation.
It never happened.
Yeah, I don't remember it at all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to Nashville Demystified. I am your host, Alex Steed. Thank you, Jacob, for being on the show. You can find him all over the place. If you're looking for a house, he's interested in selling you one. Or if you're looking to dance, go to the 5 spot on Mondays. I really appreciated that conversation. It was a lot of fun to have. Thank you so much to Jesse LaFontaine for producing the show. He's responsible for all things audio post-production. Find us on social media, like I said, Facebook, Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. Twitter, etc. We're in all of the places. Please listen to the back episodes if you have not. And I think that's all I've got for you. I look forward to talking with you next week. So long, everybody.